The blood-red horizon painted the vast Utah territory with an eerie glow as Catherine Wilson pressed her back against the sturdy oak of the general store, her trembling fingers adjusting the thick veil that concealed half her face, a face that once drew admiring glances, but now harbored a secret she'd sworn to hide forever. Provo, Utah Territory, 1876, was like any other frontier settlement, a place where the righteous found God and sinners found trouble. Catherine had come seeking neither, only escape. 3 months had passed since she'd stepped off the eastbound train, her life's possessions in a single trunk, her heart closed like a vault. "Miss Wilson," the shopkeeper's voice startled her. "Your order's ready inside." Catherine nodded, steadying herself before entering Swanson's general store. The dim interior offered temporary relief from curious eyes, though she never fully escaped the whispers that followed her veiled presence. "Flour, coffee, and those ribbons you requested," Mr. Swanson said, pushing the parcels across the counter. "Though I can't imagine what good ribbons do when nobody ever sees your hair." Catherine forced a smile beneath her veil. "Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Got a letter for you, too," he added, producing an envelope. "Came with yesterday's mail." Her heart quickened. Nobody knew she was here except her aunt in Boston, who'd promised to maintain her secret. She tucked the letter into her pocket and gathered her purchases, eager to return to the small cabin on the outskirts of town she'd purchased with the last of her inheritance. Outside, Provo bustled with afternoon activity. Cowboys mingled with Mormon settlers, while wagons kicked up dust along the main thoroughfare. Catherine kept her head down, skirting the edge of the street to avoid collisions that might expose what she fought so desperately to hide. She'd almost reached the edge of town when disaster struck. "Watch yourself, lady." The warning came too late. A horse reared unexpectedly as a firecracker exploded nearby some children's mischief, and Catherine found herself knocked backward into the dirt, her packages scattering. Worse, her veil had shifted, revealing the left side of her face. Gasping, she scrambled to readjust it, but the damage was done. Several passers-by had glimpsed what lay beneath. The jagged scar that ran from her temple to her jaw, puckered and angry against her otherwise delicate features. "Let me help you, madam." A deep voice accompanied the hand extended toward her. Catherine refused to look up, focusing instead on gathering her parcels. "I require no assistance, thank you. Your flour's spilled, and those ribbons are halfway to being trampled." The man crouched beside her, already collecting her belongings. "Least I can do is help, considering it was my horse that got spooked." Reluctantly, Catherine raised her eyes to find herself staring into the bluest gaze she'd ever encountered. The man wore the dust of long travel on his clothes, a well-worn Stetson casting shadows on a face weathered by sun and wind. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but striking strong-jawed and clear-eyed. "Cole Vasquez," he offered, tipping his hat. "Just rode into town. Catherine Wilson." She kept her response clipped, adjusting her veil more securely. His eyes lingered briefly on her covered face but asked no questions. "Heading home. I can carry these for you." "That won't be necessary, Mr. Vasquez." "Cole," he corrected. "And I insist. My mama raised me better than to knock a lady down and leave her to pick up the pieces." Something in his easy manner disarmed her usual defenses. Perhaps it was the fatigue of constant vigilance, or simply the practical reality that her flour bag was now torn and impossible to manage alone. "Very well," she conceded. "It's not far." They walked in silence, Catherine maintaining a careful distance. Cole respected the boundary, carrying her packages without pressing for conversation. When they reached her modest cabin nestled among ponderosa pines at the settlement's edge, he placed her belongings on the porch. "Thank you, Mr. Vasquez." "Cole," he reminded her with a gentle smile. "Will you be all right with that torn flour sack? I could fetch you another from town." "I'll manage," he nodded, studying her for a moment. "Folks around here aren't used to mysteries, Miss Wilson. They'll talk until they find something more interesting." Catherine stiffened. "Is that a warning or an observation?" "Neither. Just something I've noticed in every town from Texas to Montana." He adjusted his hat. "Some secrets are worth keeping. Others just become heavier with time." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat again and turned to leave. "Good day, Miss Wilson. I expect we'll cross paths again." Catherine watched him walk away, his tall frame silhouetted against the setting sun. Only when he disappeared from view did she enter her cabin, removing the veil with a sigh of relief. She moved to the small mirror hanging beside her washing basin, confronting the reflection she avoided whenever possible. The scar was just as ugly as the day it had healed, a constant reminder of Philadelphia, of Edward, of promises broken, and a life destroyed. She traced its length with trembling fingers, remembering the night that had changed everything. Turning away, she noticed the letter she'd received and broke the seal. Her aunt's elegant handwriting filled the page, mostly pleasantries until the final paragraph. "Edward continues to make inquiries about your whereabouts. I've maintained your confidence, but he grows more insistent. Be cautious, dear Catherine. Some men cannot accept what they've lost." Catherine folded the letter and dropped it into the stove. As flames consumed her aunt's warning, she resolved to be more vigilant. Provo had offered anonymity for 3 months. Perhaps it was already time to move on. The next morning brought an unexpected knock. Catherine secured her veil before opening the door to find Mrs. Abernathy, the minister's wife, standing on her porch with a basket of fresh bread. "Good morning, Miss Wilson. I've brought you some sourdough." The older woman smiled warmly. "And an invitation. We're having a social after Sunday services. The whole town attends." "That's very kind, but I won't hear refusals," Mrs. Abernathy insisted. 3 months you've been here, keeping to yourself. It isn't healthy for a young woman alone." Catherine accepted the bread, searching for a polite excuse. "I don't wish to intrude on your community's gathering." "Nonsense. You need friends, dear." Mrs. Abernathy lowered her voice. "And between us, there's a new fellow in town, a Mr. Vasquez. Quite handsome, despite being a cattleman rather than one of our faith. Several girls are already setting their caps for him." Catherine's stomach tightened. "I've briefly made his acquaintance." "Wonderful. Then you must come Sunday." Mrs. Abernathy patted her arm. 2 o'clock at the church grounds. Nothing formal. After the minister's wife departed, Catherine closed the door, leaning against it. The thought of a social gathering, eyes watching, whispers spreading, made her chest constrict with anxiety. Yet a small, treacherous part of her yearned for companionship after months of isolation. She spent the next days debating her decision, ultimately resolving to attend briefly to satisfy Mrs. Abernathy's kindness, if nothing else. Sunday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Catherine dressed carefully in her best navy skirt and white blouse, arranging her veil to cover the left side of her face as naturally as possible. The church grounds were already filled with townspeople when she arrived. Children played tag between tables laden with food while adults gathered in conversational clusters. Catherine hovered at the perimeter, acknowledging polite nods with her own. "Miss Wilson." Mrs. Abernathy appeared at her side. "I'm so pleased you came. Let me introduce you to some of our congregation." For the next hour, Catherine endured well-intentioned introductions. She spoke little, offering only necessary responses, acutely aware of curious glances at her veiled face. The questions never came directly. These were mannered people, but hung unspoken in every interaction. She was contemplating a graceful exit when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Afternoon, Miss Wilson." She turned to find Cole Vasquez, looking considerably more polished than their first meeting. His dark hair was neatly combed, his white shirt a stark contrast to his tan skin. "Mr. Vasquez," she acknowledged, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Mrs. Abernathy is persuasive." His eyes crinkled with amusement, "and the promise of good food draws even heathens like me to church gatherings." Despite herself, Catherine smiled beneath her veil. "Are you settling into Provo, for now?" He gestured toward an empty bench beneath a cottonwood. "Would you care to sit? You've been standing a while." She hesitated but followed him to the bench, careful to position herself so her veiled side faced him. "What brings a cattleman to Mormon country?" "Work. I'm overseeing a cattle drive from Texas to Montana. Provo's a convenient stop to resupply and give the men some rest." He stretched his long legs before him. "But there's talk of trouble ahead, Apache movement near our planned route." "That sounds dangerous." "It can be." He studied her profile. "You're not from Utah originally, are you? Is my accent so obvious? Not your accent, your manner." "Eastern, I'd guess." "Philadelphia or Boston?" Catherine stiffened. "You're observant. Necessary skill in my line of work." He paused, then added gently, "Just as I observe you're more comfortable when people sit on your right side." Her hand instinctively moved toward her veil. "Mr. Vasquez, Cole," he corrected automatically, "and I apologize, that was forward of me." "Yes, it was." She prepared to stand, but his next word stopped her. "I have a sister who wears a veil too. Different reason, burns from a house fire when she was 12. His voice softened. "Took her years to stop hiding away entirely." Catherine remained seated, uncertain how to respond. "I'm sorry about your sister." "She's thriving now, married with 2 children in San Antonio," he smiled. "Time and the right people make many things bearable, Miss Wilson." Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Parker, a stout man with a perpetually worried expression. "Vasquez," the sheriff nodded. "Got word from a scout. Those Apaches you were concerned about have indeed been spotted near Red Rock Pass. Thought you'd want to know." Cole stood immediately. "How many?" "Small band, maybe 15, but they've already hit 2 homesteads. I need to warn my men." Cole turned to Catherine. "Excuse me, Miss Wilson, duty calls." She watched him stride away, speaking intently with the sheriff. Around her, the social continued uninterrupted. Most attendees, unaware of the potential danger, discussed mere feet away. Catherine departed shortly after, the peaceful afternoon suddenly feeling ominous. At her cabin, she double-checked the locks and brought her father's old revolver from its hiding place. The Apache threat wouldn't likely reach town, but frontier life had taught her preparedness. She was startled by another knock that evening. Approaching cautiously with the revolver concealed in her skirts, she called through the door. "Who's there?" "Cole Vasquez, Miss Wilson. Apologies for the late hour." She opened the door to find him mounted on a chestnut gelding, 2 other riders waiting a respectful distance behind. "We're heading out tonight," he explained. "Taking a different route north to avoid the trouble." "That seems wise." He hesitated. "Your cabin's isolated. If there's trouble, you might want to consider staying in town until it passes." "I'll be fine, Mr. Vasquez." "Cole," he corrected once more, a hint of frustration in his tone. He reached into his saddlebag and extended a folded paper. "My intended route in case," he paused, "in case you need to find me." Catherine accepted the paper, bemused by his concern. "Safe travels, then, Miss Wilson." He leaned slightly forward in his saddle. "I'll return through Provo in about 6 weeks. I'd very much like to call on you properly when I do." The unexpected declaration left her momentarily speechless. "That's hardly necessary." Not necessary, no. His eyes held hers steadily. But desired, at least on my part. Before she could formulate a response, he tipped his hat and turned his horse. Good evening, Catherine. She watched until the three riders disappeared into the darkness, then closed her door, heart racing with confusion. No man had expressed interest in her since the accident, since the scar that had transformed her from belle of Philadelphia society to reclusive spinster. Cole Vasquez couldn't possibly be sincere. More likely, he was merely being kind to a woman he perceived as damaged and alone. Or worse, perhaps curiosity drove him the mystery of what lay beneath her veil. Either way, she told herself firmly, in 6 weeks she could be gone from Provo. It would be safer that way. The next morning brought unexpected commotion to Catherine's door. 3 women from town stood on her porch, led by Mrs. Abernathy, all carrying baskets and wearing expressions of determination. "We're moving you temporarily," Mrs. Abernathy announced without preamble. "The sheriffs ordered all outlying residents to come into town until this Apache business is settled." "That's unnecessary. It's not a request, dear." The minister's wife was already pushing past her into the cabin. "Pack what you need for a week or 2. You'll stay with us." Catherine found herself swept into the Abernathy's comfortable home on Pine Street by midday. Despite her protests, she secretly appreciated the intervention. The previous night had been sleepless, filled with memory-fueled nightmares and new anxieties about Apache attacks. Life in the Abernathy household proved surprisingly agreeable. The minister and his wife were kind but not intrusive, respecting Catherine's privacy while including her in family routines. Their 16-year-old daughter, Emma, was initially curious about the veil but soon accepted it as simply Catherine's way. "Did you really meet Cole Vasquez?" Emma asked one afternoon as they shelled peas on the back porch. "Harriet Jenkins says he spoke with you at the social." "Briefly," Catherine acknowledged. "He seems capable." Emma sighed dreamily. "He's the handsomest man who's ever come through Provo. Even Mother says so, though she'd prefer someone of our faith, of course." Catherine focused on the peas. "I believe he's only passing through." "That's what makes him romantic," Emma declared. "Like in novels, the mysterious stranger who appears just long enough to steal a heart before riding away." "Real life rarely follows novel plots," Catherine responded gently, thinking of her own shattered romantic notions. "You sound like you know that from experience." Emma studied her with surprising perception. "Were you in love before, Miss Catherine?" The question pierced unexpectedly deep. "Yes," she admitted. "Once." "What happened?" Catherine's fingers stilled on a pea pod. "He changed his mind." "Because of—" Emma gestured vaguely toward Catherine's veil. "Emma Abernathy." Her mother appeared in the doorway. "That is quite enough personal questioning." "It's all right," Catherine said, though relief coursed through her at the interruption. "Natural curiosity." "Nevertheless, some matters remain private." Mrs. Abernathy gave her daughter a pointed look. "Now come help prepare the evening meal." As Emma departed, Mrs. Abernathy sat beside Catherine. "I apologize for my daughter's forwardness. She meant no harm." The older woman hesitated. "Catherine, I hope you know that whatever burden you carry, visible or invisible, this community can be a place of healing. You've all been very kind. Not kindness, Christian duty." Mrs. Abernathy patted her hand. "And perhaps friendship, if you'll allow it." 2 weeks passed with no further Apache incidents. Gradually, outlying residents returned to their homes, and on a crisp Monday morning, Catherine prepared to do the same. She'd grown unexpectedly comfortable with the Abernathys, finding in their ordered household a peace she hadn't experienced since childhood. "You're welcome to stay longer," Mrs. Abernathy offered as Catherine packed her few belongings. "You've been more than generous." Catherine replied. "But I've imposed enough." "Then at least join us for dinner this Sunday. The Parkers are coming, and Sheriff Parker mentioned receiving word from that cattle drive. He may have news of your Mr. Vasquez." "He's hardly my Mr. Vasquez," Catherine protested, ignoring the inexplicable flutter in her stomach. Mrs. Abernathy merely smiled knowingly. Catherine's cabin stood undisturbed, exactly as she'd left it. She spent the afternoon cleaning, trying not to think about Cole Vasquez or why news of him should matter to her. She'd known the man precisely twice, both brief encounters. Yet his direct gaze and unassuming manner had somehow penetrated defenses built over 3 years of isolation. Sunday dinner at the Abernathys proved informative. Sheriff Parker reported that the Apache band had moved westward after a cavalry detachment was dispatched from Fort Douglas. "And Vasquez's cattle drive?" Mr. Abernathy inquired. "Did they encounter trouble?" "Not with Indians," the sheriff replied between bites of roast beef. "But there was some business with rustlers near the Idaho border. Vasquez himself apparently tracked down the thieves returned with the stolen cattle and the rustlers tied to their saddles." Catherine found herself leaning forward slightly, eager for details despite herself. "Man knows his business," Sheriff Parker continued. "Sent word he'll be coming through Provo again in about 3 weeks ahead of schedule. 3 weeks. Catherine absorbed this information silently, uncertain why it caused both anticipation and dread to coil within her. Life resumed its routine. Catherine maintained her solitary existence, venturing into town only when necessary, always veiled. Yet something had shifted subtly during her stay with the Abernathys. Several townswomen now greeted her by name, and Mr. Swanson at the general store had begun setting aside publications he thought might interest a lady of refinement like herself. Small kindnesses, yet they reminded Catherine of the life she'd once known, the social connections she'd severed after the accident. Late one afternoon, while gathering herbs from her small garden, Catherine noticed a rider approaching. Her first instinct was wariness, but as the figure drew closer she recognized Mrs. Parker, the sheriff's wife. "Miss Wilson," the woman called, reining her horse. "I've come with news." Catherine straightened, brushing soil from her apron. "Has something happened?" "A telegram came for Sheriff Parker." Mrs. Parker dismounted, excitement evident in her flushed face. "Cole Vasquez and his men were attacked north of Idaho Falls. Indians or outlaws, the message wasn't clear." Catherine's heart contracted painfully. "Were there casualties?" "Several injured, including Mr. Vasquez himself. They're diverted to Fort Hall for medical attention." Mrs. Parker grabbed Catherine's hands. "I thought you should know, given his particular interest in you before departing." "He was merely being neighborly," Catherine protested weakly. Mrs. Parker arched a skeptical eyebrow. "Men like Cole Vasquez don't ride miles out of their way after dark to be neighborly to women they've met twice, dear." After Mrs. Parker departed, Catherine paced her cabin restlessly. Cole Vasquez was nothing to her, a passing acquaintance, a momentary kindness in a life deliberately devoid of connections. His injury, while unfortunate, shouldn't affect her. Yet sleep eluded her that night, her mind replaying their brief interactions, imagining various injuries, wondering if he would recover, if he would still return through Provo as planned. In the morning, Catherine made a decision that surprised even herself. She walked to town and sent a telegram to Fort Hall, inquiring after the condition of Cole Vasquez and his men. The telegrapher raised eyebrows but asked no questions. 2 days later, a response arrived. "Vasquez recovering, stop bullet, wound to shoulder not life-threatening, stop expects departure within week, stop." The relief Catherine felt was disproportionate to their brief acquaintance. She folded the telegram carefully into her pocket, suddenly aware of how this action reaching out, showing concern, represented her first voluntary connection to another person in 3 years. Life in Provo continued with autumn's approach, bringing cooler temperatures and preparations for harvest. Catherine found herself accepting more social invitations, tea with Mrs. Abernathy, helping at the church quilting circle. Always veiled, always careful, but gradually emerging from her self-imposed exile. She never mentioned Cole Vasquez, nor her telegram concerning his welfare. Yet thoughts of the forthright cattleman lingered unexpectedly in quiet moments, his direct blue gaze, his acceptance of her veiled presence without demands for explanation. 3 weeks after the news of his injury, Catherine returned from town to find a single red rose on her porch step, alongside a note in bold handwriting. "Miss Wilson, I've returned to Provo and would be honored if you'd permit me to call tomorrow afternoon. Respectfully, Cole Vasquez." Catherine stared at the elegant bloom, emotions warring within her. Part of her wanted to flee to pack her belongings and disappear before he arrived. Another part, growing stronger daily, yearned for connection, for the possibility of being seen despite her disfigurement. She placed the rose in water, the note beside it, and spent a restless night weighing her decision. By morning, resolution came. She would receive him, explain gently why any interest on his part was misplaced, and establish clear boundaries. It was the sensible approach, the only approach for a woman in her circumstances. Cole arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, mounted on the same chestnut gelding but dressed in clean clothes that emphasized his broad shoulders. Catherine noticed he favored his left arm slightly as he dismounted, evidence of his recent injury. "Miss Wilson." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair in need of trimming. "Thank you for receiving me, Mr. Vasquez." She stood on her porch, maintaining physical distance. "I trust you've recovered from your ordeal." Surprise flickered across his features. "News travels fast. It's a small town." She didn't mention her telegram. "May I?" He gestured toward the porch. Catherine nodded, stepping aside as he climbed the steps. In closer proximity, she could see new lines of fatigue around his eyes, a healing cut above his right eyebrow. "You've been through a difficult time," she observed. "Occupational hazard." He smiled ruefully. "Though I admit, this drive has seen more than its share of troubles." An awkward silence followed. Catherine had rehearsed her speech about boundaries and impossibilities, yet found the words sticking in her throat. "I brought you something," Cole said finally, reaching carefully into his jacket to produce a small package wrapped in brown paper. "From my travels." Catherine hesitated before accepting it. "That wasn't necessary. Please," he insisted. "Open it." She unwrapped the package to reveal a small leather-bound book of poetry, Tennyson's collected works, the gilt edges slightly worn but the binding still solid. "I noticed you had Browning on your shelf that night. I came to warn you," he explained. "Thought you might appreciate another English poet." Catherine ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "You were observant. About some things." His voice softened. "Not observant enough to avoid rustlers or that Shoshone hunting party. Yet you survived, by luck and good companions." He gestured toward a wooden bench on her porch. "May we sit? My shoulder still complains after too long standing." They settled on the bench, Catherine ensuring her veiled side faced him as usual. The autumn afternoon was pleasant, golden light filtering through changing leaves. "How long will you remain in Provo?" she asked. "A week, perhaps 2. He studied her profile. "The cattle are pasturing north of town while arrangements are finalized with the Montana buyers. After that." He shrugged his good shoulder. "There's always another drive, another job. a nomadic existence. Thus far, he turned slightly toward her. Though lately I've found myself considering more permanent arrangements. The implication hung between them. Catherine forced herself to address it directly. Mr. Vasquez, Cole, he corrected, the repetition becoming something of a private understanding between them. Cole, she conceded, I believe I should clarify something. Your attention is flattering, but you're concerned about my intentions, he finished for her. Or perhaps about your circumstances, Catherine stiffened. My circumstances, your privacy, your reasons for maintaining distance. His gaze was steady. Catherine, I don't pretend to know your past. I only know that in our brief acquaintance, I've found myself thinking of you far more than reason would dictate. You don't know me, she whispered. I'd like to. He reached toward her hand resting on the bench between them but stopped short of touching her. If you'd permit it. Catherine stood abruptly, moving to the porch railing. You don't understand. There are reasons why I should not encourage any attachment. Cole remained seated, respecting her withdrawal. Would those reasons include whatever caused you to shield your face from the world? The directness of his question startled her. For 3 years, people had tiptoed around the subject of her veil, pretending not to notice or wonder. Yes, she managed finally. Cole nodded as if confirming something to himself. May I share something with you, Catherine? She nodded cautiously. When I was 20, I rode with a ranger company along the Texas border. During a skirmish with bandits, I took a bullet here. He touched his right thigh. Thought I might lose the leg. While recovering, I met a nurse, beautiful, kind. We courted for months until I could walk again. His expression darkened. The day I was discharged, she confessed she couldn't marry a man who might always walk with a limp. I'm sorry, Catherine said softly. For years after, I measured every woman I met against that betrayal, expecting the same shallow judgment. He stood, crossing to stand near her at the railing, though still maintaining a respectful distance. Until I realized I was judging unfairly punishing strangers for one person's cruelty. His words struck uncomfortably close to Catherine's own situation. Hadn't she been doing precisely that, assuming all men would react as Edward had? Your experience and mine are hardly comparable, she said finally, perhaps not in specifics. He turned to face her directly. But Catherine, whatever you hide beneath that veil, it's just skin, just tissue. It doesn't determine your worth. Tears welled in Catherine's eyes, thankfully concealed. In my experience, the world disagrees. Then your experience has been with the wrong people. He extended his hand, palm up, between them. I'm not asking you to remove your veil. I'm asking if I might call on you properly during my stay in Provo. Conversation. Perhaps a drive on Sunday. Catherine stared at his outstretched hand. The sensible course remained clear. Thank him politely, decline firmly, maintain her isolation. Instead, she found herself placing her fingers lightly against his palm. Sunday, she agreed softly. His fingers closed gently around hers, the contact sending unexpected warmth through her arm. Sunday it is. The intervening days passed with excruciating slowness. Catherine vacillated between anticipation and terror, changing her mind hourly about whether to proceed with their planned outing or fabricate some excuse to cancel. In the end, determination won over fear. When Cole arrived Sunday afternoon with a rented buggy, Catherine was waiting, dressed in her best blue dress, her veil arranged with particular care. You look lovely, he said simply as he helped her into the buggy. They drove along the foothills east of Provo, the autumn colors splashing the landscape with gold and crimson. Cole proved an engaging companion, sharing stories of cattle drives and frontier adventures without dominating the conversation. He asked questions about her interests, listening attentively to her responses, drawing her out gradually without pressing for personal details she wasn't ready to share. "You mentioned Philadelphia once," he noted as they stopped to admire a particularly spectacular vista. "Did you grow up there?" Catherine hesitated. "Yes, my father was a banker." "Was? He passed away 4 years ago, my mother when I was 16. Cole nodded sympathetically. "No siblings, an older brother in California. We're not close." Not since he'd sided with Edward after the accident, suggesting Catherine should be grateful for any man willing to marry her with that face. "And what brought you west?" Cole asked. "Most Eastern ladies prefer more established cities like Denver or San Francisco." "I wanted anonymity," Catherine admitted. "Somewhere I could start fresh." Cole seemed to understand what remained unsaid. "Provo's a good town, decent people." "Yes, I've discovered that." She turned slightly toward him. "And you mentioned Texas before, born and raised near San Antonio." "Fourth-generation Texan, though my grandfather came from Mexico originally." Pride colored his voice. "Started riding herd when I was 14, worked my way up to trail boss by 25. It seems a dangerous life. It can be." He flexed his injured shoulder unconsciously. "But there's freedom in it, open skies, honest work, good companions. And now you're considering more permanent arrangements, as you put it." Catherine recalled his earlier comment. A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "A man reaches a certain age, sees his friends settling with families. It changes perspective." They continued their drive, the conversation flowing more naturally as Catherine gradually relaxed. By the time they returned to her cabin, the sun was setting, painting the sky in spectacular hues. "Thank you for today," she said as he helped her down from the buggy. "It was unexpectedly pleasant, high praise indeed." His eyes twinkled with good humor. "Might I hope for another outing before I depart?" Catherine knew she should refuse. Each meeting only strengthened a connection that could lead nowhere, not with her disfigurement, not with his nomadic lifestyle. Yet she found herself nodding. "I would like that." Over the next 10 days, Cole called regularly. They rode through the countryside, attended a church social, where Catherine noted several disappointed glances from young ladies who had set their sights on the handsome cattleman, and spent one memorable afternoon by the Provo River, reading poetry aloud as autumn leaves drifted around them. Through it all, Cole never asked about her veil, never attempted to glimpse what lay beneath it. He treated the barrier as inconsequential, focusing instead on discovering the person behind it. His respect for her boundaries only deepened Catherine's confusion about her growing feelings. On their final outing before his scheduled departure, they picnicked in a meadow overlooking the valley. Cole had arranged everything: a woven blanket, a basket of bread, cheese, and fruit, even a bottle of cider from the local press. "You've thought of everything," Catherine commented as they settled on the blanket. "I wanted our last afternoon to be special." He poured cider into 2 tin cups. "Until we meet again, at least." Catherine accepted the cup, her spirits dampening at the reminder of his imminent departure. "When do you expect to return through Provo?" "Spring, perhaps, after the Montana winter breaks." He studied her over his cup. "Unless I had reason to return sooner." The implication hung between them. Catherine looked away, focusing on the valley below. "Cole, we should discuss—" "I know what you're going to say," he interrupted gently. "That this whatever has grown between us is impossible, that distance and circumstances make any attachment unwise." "Yes," she whispered. "I disagree." He set down his cup, turning to face her fully. "Catherine, in 2 weeks I've come to admire you more than any woman I've ever known. Your intelligence, your quiet strength, your dignity despite whatever brought you to hide away from the world." You don't understand, then help me understand. His voice remained gentle, but intensity burned in his gaze. Tell me what happened, Catherine. Not for curiosity's sake, but because I care about you, all of you, not just the parts you choose to show the world. Catherine's hands trembled in her lap. No one had asked so directly before. Even the Abernathys, kind as they were, had respected her privacy to the point of avoidance. It was 3 years ago, she began haltingly. I was engaged to Edward Harrington, son of my father's business partner. A good match, everyone said. Bitterness crept into her tone. I believed I loved him. Perhaps I did, in the naive way of a sheltered young woman. Cole listened silently, his expression encouraging but not intrusive. There was a fire at my father's bank. I was there late, waiting for him to finish some business. Catherine's voice grew distant with memory. The lamp in his office exploded coal oil everywhere. I tried to help him escape, but she swallowed hard. A burning beam collapsed. Father pushed me aside, but not before her hand moved unconsciously toward her veiled cheek. My father died that night. I survived, but... She gestured to her face. The left side was badly burned. The doctors did what they could, but the scarring is significant. And your fiancé? Cole asked quietly. Catherine's laugh held no humor. Edward visited once in the hospital. He couldn't even look at me. Sent a letter the next day releasing me from our engagement. She straightened her shoulders. He married Julia Whitmore 6 months later. I left Philadelphia the following spring. Cole's expression had darkened progressively during her story. This Edward sounds like he deserved a meeting with the business end of a branding iron. The unexpected comment startled a genuine laugh from Catherine. That's rather violent. Appropriate, though. His hand moved to cover hers. He was a fool, Catherine. A shallow, worthless fool. He was human, she replied softly. Few men want a disfigured wife, especially when they have other options. Few men deserve you then. Cole's fingers tightened around hers. The scar doesn't change who you are. It changed how the world sees me, how I see myself. May I see? He asked gently. Catherine stiffened, pulling her hand away. No, I apologize. He backed away slightly. That was presumptuous. Yes, it was. She began gathering the picnic items, needing activity to mask her turmoil. We should return, it's getting late. They rode back to her cabin in uncomfortable silence. Catherine berated herself for revealing so much, for allowing this man to glimpse vulnerabilities she'd protected so carefully. Tomorrow he would leave, and whatever brief connection they'd formed would fade exactly as it should. At her door, Cole helped her down from the buggy, his manner formal once again. Catherine, I've overstepped. Please forgive me. There's nothing to forgive. She couldn't meet his eyes. Safe travels, Mr. Vasquez. Cole, he corrected automatically, then sighed. Will you at least write to me? I can send letters through Mrs. Abernathy. Catherine hesitated, then nodded slightly. Perhaps. I'll write first, he promised. Every week. Goodbye, Cole. She turned quickly and entered her cabin, closing the door firmly behind her. Through the window, she watched him stand motionless for several moments before finally returning to his buggy. Only when he had driven from sight did she remove her veil, hot tears streaming down her scarred cheek. True to his word, Cole's first letter arrived 10 days later, forwarded through Mrs. Abernathy. His handwriting was surprisingly elegant for a cattleman, his descriptions of Montana territory vivid and engaging. He mentioned his crew, the preparations for winter, the negotiations with his buyers, everyday details that nonetheless painted a picture of his life. What he didn't write was equally significant. No mentions of their last conversation, no references to her revelations or his request to see her face. No pressure, no expectations. Catherine read the letter 3 times before carefully placing it in her dresser drawer. She didn't answer immediately, unsure what to write or whether responding would only encourage an impossible situation. A second letter arrived 2 weeks later, then a third. By the fourth, Catherine found herself looking forward to Mrs. Abernathy's visits, eager for news from Montana. "He asks about you every time he writes to Sheriff Parker," Mrs. Abernathy mentioned casually while delivering the fifth letter. Quite dedicated for a man who received no responses. Guilt flushed Catherine's cheeks. "I've been considering what to write. Perhaps the truth," the older woman suggested gently. "That you miss him. It's not that simple. It rarely is." Mrs. Abernathy patted her hand. "But sometimes we make things more complicated than necessary." That night, Catherine finally wrote her response, a simple letter thanking Cole for his correspondence, updating him on Provo happenings, careful to maintain a friendly but not intimate tone. She posted it the next morning, simultaneously relieved and anxious to have broken her silence. Cole's reply came with unprecedented speed, his joy at hearing from her evident in every line. Thus began a correspondence that spanned the Montana winter, letters exchanged every 2 weeks, gradually growing more personal as Catherine's reserve slowly melted. She found herself sharing memories of Philadelphia, descriptions of her childhood, even her hopes for establishing a small seamstress business in Provo. Cole reciprocated with stories of his youth in Texas, his close relationship with his sister, his dreams of someday owning land rather than perpetually driving other men's cattle. By early March, their letters had become the center of Catherine's existence. She found herself counting days between correspondence, rereading his letters until the paper grew thin at the folds. Despite her best intentions, Cole Vasquez had become important to her. "He's asked about purchasing the Davidson property," Sheriff Parker mentioned one Sunday after church. 40 acres north of town with that old cabin, good grazing land. Catherine's heart stuttered. Why would he do that? The sheriff's knowing look suggested the answer was obvious. Seems Mr. Vasquez might be considering putting down roots. That evening, a special delivery letter arrived from Cole. "Dearest Catherine, the spring thaw has begun, and with it, my thoughts turn increasingly toward Provo, toward you. Business requires my presence in Salt Lake City by month's end. Afterward, I hope to visit if you'll receive me." These months of correspondence have only strengthened what I began to feel during our brief time together. I find myself planning a future that includes you if you'll consider it. With deepest affection, Cole. Catherine's hands trembled as she read. The careful boundaries she'd maintained in her letters had evidently not disguised her growing attachment or discouraged his. Now, Cole was returning, speaking of futures and considerations that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. For the next 3 weeks, Catherine vacillated between anticipation and dread. She sewed a new dress, rearranged her cabin furnishings, then berated herself for such foolishness. What future could possibly exist between them when she couldn't even face the world without her veil? Cole arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in early April, the knock on her door both expected and startling. Catherine had glimpsed his approach from her window, noted how he paused to straighten his vest and smooth his freshly trimmed hair before climbing her porch steps. She opened the door, her veil securely in place. "Hello, Cole," Catherine. The way he said her name like something precious sent warmth through her chest. "You're a sight for winter-weary eyes." He looked different somehow, the same strong features and clear blue gaze, but perhaps more settled, more purposeful. His clothing was newer, his bearing more confident. "Please come in," she offered, stepping aside. "How was your journey?" "Long," he admitted, removing his hat as he entered. "But worth every mile." They settled into an awkward formality at first, discussing his business in Salt Lake City and the Montana winter as if they were mere acquaintances, rather than two people who had shared their innermost thoughts through months of letters. Finally, Cole set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "Catherine, I didn't come all this way for polite conversation." She smoothed her skirts nervously. "I know. I've purchased land north of town," he stated. "Good grazing land with access to water. There's a cabin needs work, but solid foundation." "Sheriff Parker mentioned it," she acknowledged. "It sounds like a good investment. It's more than an investment." His gaze held hers steadily. "It's a beginning." Catherine stood, moving to her small window. "Cole, I don't know what you're expecting from me. Nothing you're not willing to give." He remained seated, respecting her need for space. "But I want to be clear about my intentions. These past months, getting to know you through your letters, have only confirmed what I began to suspect during our time together last fall." "And what is that?" Her voice emerged barely above a whisper. "That you're the woman I want to build a life with." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Catherine pressed her hands against the window frame, steadying herself. "You don't know what you're saying," she managed finally. "You haven't seen. I don't need to see beneath your veil to know who you are, Catherine." He stood now, though he didn't approach her. "But I understand why you believe I do." She turned to face him, forcing strength into her voice. "I can't live like this. Cole, hiding behind fabric, fearing discovery, watching you gradually grow to resent the limitations my appearance places on our lives. Is that what happened with Edward? He resented your injury." "He couldn't bear to look at me," Catherine said bitterly. "Called it merciful to release me from our engagement rather than sentence me to seeing disgust in his eyes every day." Cole's jaw tightened. "Edward was a coward and a fool. He was honest about his limitations." She raised her chin. "Would you have me discover yours after it's too late? After we've committed to each other?" "My only limitation is my temper when faced with injustice," Cole replied evenly. "And right now, I'm fighting it hard, thinking about this man who made you believe your worth was in your face rather than your heart." His words struck deep, challenging assumptions Catherine had carried for 3 years. She turned away again, emotion threatening to overwhelm her composure. "Catherine," his voice softened, "I understand your fear, but at some point trust becomes a choice. I'm asking you to choose to trust me to believe that what I feel for you runs deeper than skin. And if you're wrong," she whispered, "if what you see changes everything, then I'm not the man I believe myself to be," he answered simply, "and you'd be right to send me away." Catherine closed her eyes, heart racing. 3 years of hiding, of protecting herself from judgment and rejection, had become a prison of her own making. Cole offered a key, but using it required courage she wasn't sure she possessed. "I need time," she said finally. Cole nodded, accepting her answer without protest. "I'll be in Provo for 2 weeks, getting the property ready. Take all the time you need." After he departed, Catherine paced her cabin restlessly, arguments warring within her mind. Logic insisted she maintain her protective barriers, reminded her of Edward's revulsion, of pitying glances, of the gasps that had followed her few public appearances before she'd adopted the veil. Yet her heart whispered of Cole's letters, his gentle persistence, his respect for her boundaries. He'd never pressed for details about her injury, never treated her as damaged or incomplete. The next day, Catherine visited Mrs. Abernathy, seeking wisdom from the older woman who had become her closest friend in Provo. "He wants to court me properly," she explained, hands twisting in her lap. "Perhaps more," Mrs. Abernathy beamed. "That's wonderful news." "Is it?" Catherine's voice cracked. "How can I consider a future with him when I can't even face the world without hiding?" The minister's wife considered her words carefully. "Catherine, when I first met you, I saw a woman using a veil to keep the world at arm's length. Now I wonder if perhaps it's keeping you prisoner instead. You don't understand how people react. I understand that Cole Vasquez has traveled 1,000 miles and purchased property to be near you, without ever asking you to remove your veil." Mrs. Abernathy leaned forward. "That suggests a man who sees beyond surfaces. And if he's mistaken about his own capacity for acceptance, then better to know now than wonder forever." The older woman patted her hand. "Courage isn't absence of fear, dear. It's action despite fear." Catherine left the Abernathy's home with her thoughts in turmoil. For the next 3 days, she avoided town entirely, unable to face the possibility of encountering Cole before she'd reached a decision. On the 4th evening, a knock at her door startled her from her reverie. She opened it to find Cole standing there, hat in hand, expression troubled. "I apologize for coming unannounced," he said, "but I'm leaving tomorrow." Catherine's heart plummeted. "So soon? You said 2 weeks, urgent business in Denver." His expression softened. "I'll return in a month, but I couldn't leave without seeing you again. Would you like to come in?" She offered, stepping aside. Cole shook his head. "Actually, I thought we might walk. The evening's pleasant." They strolled silently toward a small creek that bordered Catherine's property. Spring had transformed the landscape, wildflowers dotting the grasses, trees budding with new life. They stopped at a fallen log overlooking the water. "I've been thinking about what you said," Catherine began hesitantly. "About trust being a choice." Cole nodded, waiting for her to continue. "For 3 years I've defined myself by this." She gestured to her veiled face. "Let one man's rejection determine my worth." "He was wrong," Cole said simply. "Perhaps." Catherine gathered her courage. "Before you leave, I want you to see, to know exactly what you're asking for." Cole's expression remained steady. "Only if you're certain. I'm not." She gave a shaky laugh. "But I need to know too." With trembling fingers, Catherine reached for her veil. Time seemed to slow as she unpinned it, heart hammering so loudly she was certain Cole must hear it. Finally, the fabric fell away, exposing what she had hidden for 3 years. The scar ran from her left temple down her cheek to her jaw, an angry red line surrounded by puckered, discolored skin, where the burning beam had seared her flesh. The damage had narrowly missed her eye but had distorted the corner of her mouth slightly, giving her expression a permanent asymmetry. Catherine kept her gaze lowered, unable to watch Cole's reaction, waiting for the sharp intake of breath that had become so familiar, the prelude to pity or revulsion. Instead, she felt gentle fingers beneath her chin, tilting her face upward. Cole studied her carefully, his blue eyes moving across her features without flinching, without the flicker of distaste she'd grown to expect. After what seemed an eternity, his thumb traced the length of her scar with exquisite gentleness. "This," he said softly, "makes you beautiful." Catherine's breath caught. "Don't, not because it's a scar," he continued, his voice low and intense, "but because it shows your courage, your sacrifice trying to save your father, your survival." His fingers continued their gentle exploration. "This is part of your story, Catherine. A story of strength, not shame." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling onto her cheeks, both the scarred and the unblemished. Cole wiped them away with his thumb, his touch reverent. "How can you look at me and not see the damage?" she whispered. "I see all of you," he replied. "The woman in the letters, the woman who laughed with me by the river, the woman brave enough to stand here now facing her greatest fear." His hand cupped her cheek. "The woman I've fallen in love with." The declaration hung between them, honest and unadorned. Catherine searched his eyes for any hint of insincerity, any shadow of revulsion disguised as acceptance. She found only warmth, admiration, and something deeper that made her heart race. "I don't know if I can believe this is real," she admitted. "Then let me spend the rest of our lives proving it to you." Cole's hand moved to capture hers. "Catherine Wilson, I came to Provo looking for grazing land and found something infinitely more precious. Will you consider becoming my wife?" The question stole her breath. Despite their correspondence, despite his return, she hadn't truly allowed herself to imagine this moment. "You should think carefully," she cautioned. "Marriage means being seen with me explaining to strangers, enduring their stares." "Let them stare," he said firmly. "I'll be too busy being the proudest man in Utah territory to notice." A tentative smile curved Catherine's lips, the first genuine smile she'd offered without the shield of her veil in 3 years. "You're either the most foolish man I've ever met, or the most remarkable." "I prefer determined," he grinned. "Is that a yes?" "It's a I need more time," she answered honestly. "Not because I doubt your sincerity, but because I've lived behind barriers for so long. I need to learn how to exist in the world again before I can promise myself to anyone." Cole nodded, disappointment visible in his eyes but acceptance too. "That's fair. When I return from Denver," "When you return," she agreed. "We'll talk more then." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I'll count the days." The month of Cole's absence proved transformational for Catherine. With trembling determination, she gradually ventured into Provo without her veil, first to the Abernathys, then to church, finally to the general store and other businesses. The reactions varied. Some children stared openly until hushed by parents. Several adults struggled to maintain eye contact, their discomfort evident. But others, particularly those who had come to know her over the past year, offered smiles of encouragement and continued treating her as they always had. Mrs. Abernathy accompanied her on many of these outings, a steadfast presence beside her. "You're doing wonderfully," she assured Catherine after a particularly difficult encounter with visiting strangers. "Each time gets easier." Surprisingly, it did. Catherine discovered that the anticipation of negative reactions often proved worse than the reality. Many people, after their initial surprise, seemed to forget about her scar during conversation, focusing instead on the woman herself. By the time Cole returned from Denver in mid-May, Catherine had established a new normal in Provo, still occasionally uncomfortable under curious stares, but no longer hiding. She'd even begun accepting seamstress work, her skilled needlework drawing customers despite her appearance. Cole arrived at her cabin on a perfect spring afternoon, his face lighting with joy when Catherine opened the door without her veil. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "I look the same as when you left," she pointed out, though pleasure warmed her at his words. "Exactly," he grinned. "Beautiful." They walked to the creek again, Catherine updating him on her gradual reemergence into society. Cole listened attentively, pride evident in his expression. "Your property is coming along," she mentioned. "I rode past yesterday. The roof repairs look substantial." "Sheriff Parker's been overseeing the work." Cole helped her settle on their familiar log. "The barn foundation is complete too. You're committed to staying then?" "I am." His gaze held hers steadily, for many reasons. Catherine took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about your proposal." "And?" His expression remained carefully neutral, though tension showed in the set of his shoulders. "I've lived behind walls for 3 years," she said slowly. "First physical ones in Philadelphia, then the veil here, then emotional barriers with everyone I met." She looked up at him. "You're the first person who made me want to tear them down." Hope brightened his eyes. "Is that a yes?" "It's I'm still afraid, but I'm more afraid of missing the chance to love you," she answered honestly. "So yes." Cole Vasquez, if you still want me, scars and fears and all, I would be honored to become your wife." Cole's restraint broke. He gathered her into his arms, his kiss expressing everything words couldn't contain: tenderness, passion, promise. Catherine responded with equal fervor, 3 years of isolation melting away in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally parted, Catherine touched his cheek wonderingly. "I never thought I'd have this again." "Neither did I," he admitted. "After years of drifting, I'd stopped believing I'd find home in a person." They were married 3 weeks later in Provo's small church, Mrs. Abernathy weeping openly in the front pew. Catherine wore no veil, only wildflowers in her upswept hair and a simple cream dress she'd sewn herself. Cole's eyes never left her face during the ceremony, his expression a mixture of awe and adoration that silenced any lingering doubts. Their reception brought the entire town together. Curiosity about the reclusive Miss Wilson's transformation into Mrs. Vasquez drawing even the most reserved citizens. Catherine stood proudly beside her husband, accepting congratulations with growing confidence. "You've changed this past year," Sheriff Parker commented as he shook Cole's hand. "Both of you. For the better, I hope," Catherine smiled. "Undoubtedly," the sheriff nodded. "It's good to see you stepping into the light, Mrs. Vasquez." They moved into Cole's renovated cabin the following day, a comfortable home with sturdy walls and wide windows that welcomed sunlight. Over the next months, they established their ranch together, Cole's experience with cattle complemented by Catherine's practical management of their household. Word spread about Cole Vasquez's capable handling of cattle drives, bringing offers of partnership from larger operations. Catherine's reputation as a skilled seamstress grew simultaneously, her creations sought after by Provo's leading families. Their complementary talents brought prosperity to their small ranch, allowing them to expand their holdings and their herd. One evening a year after their wedding, as they sat on their porch watching sunset paint the mountains, Cole pulled Catherine into his lap, his hand instinctively tracing the scar on her cheek, a gesture that had become one of intimate affection between them. "Any regrets?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Catherine leaned into his embrace, contentment filling her. "Only that I wasted 3 years hiding before you found me." "Not wasted," he corrected. "You were healing, gathering strength." His fingers continued their gentle path along her scar. "And I would have waited much longer if necessary. Fortunately, you didn't have to." She turned to kiss him properly. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." "Always," he promised against her lips, "for the rest of our days." 5 years later, Cole and Catherine Vasquez stood on that same porch, watching their twin sons chase fireflies in the summer twilight. Their ranch had prospered beyond expectations, becoming one of the territory's most respected operations. Catherine's scarred face had become so familiar in Provo that newcomers often failed to notice it at all, seeing instead the confident woman who served on the school board and organized community assistance for families in need. "Thomas, James." 10 more minutes, then inside for bed, Catherine called to the 4-year-olds who groaned in unison but nodded agreement. Cole slipped his arm around her waist. "They've got your determination." "And your stubbornness," she countered, leaning into his solid warmth. "Fair point." He chuckled, then grew serious. "Letter came today from Philadelphia, from your brother." Catherine stiffened slightly. "What did Howard want?" "To make amends, it seems. He's passing through Salt Lake City next month and asked if he might visit." Cole watched her carefully. "The decision is entirely yours." She considered the request, remembering Howard's hurtful words after her injury, his alignment with Edward against her. Yet time and love had healed wounds she once thought permanent. "Yes," she decided finally. "I'd like him to meet his nephews." to see the life we've built." Cole kissed her forehead. "Proud of you. I learned from the best." She turned to face him fully. "You taught me that scars are just evidence of battles survived, not reasons for shame." "You always had that strength," he corrected gently, his fingers tracing her scar as they had that first evening by the creek, a familiar gesture that still sent warmth through her body. "I just reminded you it was there." As twilight deepened into night, their sons tired of their chase and ran to be swept into their father's strong arms. Catherine watched Cole carry their boys inside, his gentle handling of the rambunctious twins testament to the man she'd married, steadfast, loving, true to his word in all things. Following them inside, Catherine caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window glass, the scar still visible after all these years, but no longer the first thing she noticed about herself. Now she saw the happiness in her eyes, the confidence in her bearing, the contentment of a woman fully at home in her skin and her life. From hiding behind a veil to embracing her whole self, the journey had been painful, frightening, beautiful. Like the scar itself, it told a story not of disfigurement but of healing, of courage found through love both given and received. As she joined her family inside their warm home, Catherine silently thanked the twist of fate that had brought a travel-weary cattleman to Provo years ago, the man who had traced her scar with gentle fingers and shown her that sometimes the most profound beauty emerges from life's deepest wounds.